Now, in my experience, I was always oriented towards more of a plant-based diet. I've been a vegan, well, a little bit of vegetarianism in there, but close to 40 years now, and was really quite passionate about finding ways to make plant-based food delicious and teaching other people how to incorporate that into their lives. And at the same time, even with many, many years of different types of cleanses and really clean eating, alcohol, organic foods for the most part, lots of spiritual work, I was still in my 40s and into my 50s beginning to get symptoms that were quite troublesome, really, and worrisome too. I was having some pretty major issues with my eyes it was feeling quite worrisome, a lot of pressure and floaters. That was when I started praying. And shortly after is when I was introduced to medical medium. But I was also saying in my newsletter that I had quite severe restless leg syndrome, which at first I thought it was just energetic releases, but I realized later on that it was heavy metals and viral debris that was inflaming the nerves. And this is Anthony William, medical medium, helped me to understand that. And there were other issues as well. And so in about 2017, I was meditating one day and something just dropped in and said, go see Mary O'Reilly, who was my naturopath at the time. And I hadn't really planned on seeing her. I was feeling okay. But I did call her up and she said to me, oh, I'm so glad you called. She says, I'm retiring in 2 weeks. Why don't you just come and visit me? So we actually had a visit, not an appointment, and just chatted about what was going on in each of our lives. And she had a stack of the medical medium's first book on her desk. And she says, I want you to have this. She says, you're going to love it. She knew a little bit about my approach to nutrition. And part of me was, of course, very grateful. And part of me was also skeptical. When you call a book medical medium, you just never know what you're going to get. But I brought it home and I put it on my desk. And the very next day, I had a client who had diabetes. And I thought, I wonder what this guy says about diabetes. Because I had always felt that fruit and sugars were not the issue. I really was quite disturbed by the number of people and so-called experts out there telling people to avoid fruit. It just didn't make any sense to me. In my being, in my heart, it always felt like fruit was the most powerful food and the most innocent food and the most spiritually uplifting food. And sure enough, he did not recommend decreasing fruit. He actually recommended increasing fruit. But the key there, he recommended drastically reducing fats in the diet, all the overt fats in the diet. And he also spoke about how the liver was also a big issue with that. And in that book, he began to speak about how to clear the liver. But one of the primary ways is to reduce the level of fats that you're consuming. And so I thought, oh, that's really cool. And so I just read what he had to say. I saw my client. And later on that evening, I began to delve into that book. And the very first chapter in Medical Medium, I think that's what the first book is called, he speaks about how he got his gift. So when Anthony William was 4 years old, he was lying in bed one Sunday morning and he began to hear a voice. And it was like the voice was just outside of his right ear. Now, as a 4-year-old, he did not understand where that voice was coming from. And he looked around his room and outside the window and there was nothing there. And he just kind of let it go and continued with his day. He didn't tell his parents about it. And that night, he was at the dinner table with his family and his extended family, as people did in those days with Sunday dinners. And one of the interesting things was that this man showed up. And Anthony said he had long hair and a long robe, and he just assumed everybody else could see him. And the man said to him, and it was the same voice that he had heard that morning, he said to him, "Go stand next to your grandmother." And which he did. And then he said, "Say the words, lung cancer." And 4 years old, he didn't know either of those words yet, but he managed to get it out after a few tries, and people understood what he was saying. And they got her checked, and sure enough, she had lung cancer. And so this was the beginning of it. And since then, that voice speaks to him 24/7. It never stops. It's just outside of his ear. So it's not like, how sometimes I know I sometimes hear a voice in my head, like a voice of wisdom, but it's coming from inside of me. But if he blocks his right ear, the voice gets muffled. So it's kind of an interesting phenomenon. I haven't heard of anybody else experiencing spiritual information in this way. And since that time, basically, he asked him, who he was, and this voice called himself Spirit of Compassion. And through the years, Anthony has understood that Spirit of Compassion is an energy, a frequency of compassion, which is much needed nowadays, particularly in the health realm. There are so many people, and people who are really quite committed to their health, that are suffering from mystery symptoms that modern medicine just simply can't help them with. There are many people that can't even get off the couch or out of bed in the morning. People who are suffering from symptoms that take away their capacity to enjoy life and to work and to fulfill their soul's promise. And so Spirit of Compassion explained to Anthony that they had agreed prior to his lifetime that he would come in and he would be the voice of Spirit of Compassion. He would share this information that would help millions of people to heal, which is what is actually happening now. And so for this first part of his life, like even when he was in school as a little kid, he would get health readings on the people around him, on the kids around him. Anywhere he would go to a mall and he'd get help, even if he didn't want to hear it, which was most of the time he didn't want to hear it, but he'd get readings on people's livers and kidneys and heavy metals and what viruses they had. And so essentially, Spirit of Compassion was educating him about the nature of disease in the 20th century, because it's very different today than it was even 100 years ago, because we're dealing with all these new chemicals, more heavy metals than ever, a lot of interference from chemtrails and all kinds of things. So we're dealing with more than ever, which means that our bodies are being challenged more than ever. And so since that time, as a teenager, he began to work in a grocery store. I don't think in those days there was even really many health food stores around, but he worked in a grocery store and people would come in, and people began to know that he was really good at, like, he would just meet somebody and say, "Okay, you've got a heart issue." And how do you know that? How do you, have you seen my doctor's records? But he just knew. And then he would start to tell them, "Okay, well, you should be eating apples." Or eventually the store manager bought a juicer so he could go into the back and make celery juice for people. So this started as a very young kid. And for the most part, in the early days, he was doing it sort of half-heartedly. He did not want that life. He didn't feel that he wanted to completely dedicate himself, one, to hearing all this information about people, that he just wanted to live his life. And he really resisted it for a long time and even considered ending his life. At one point, he asked Spirit of Compassion if there was anybody else on the planet who had his gift, because he thought, well, maybe if there's somebody else out there, then I won't feel quite so lonely or burdened. And he said, there are other people that receive and are tuned in to the spirit of compassion, but he's the only one that hears it in that way. And it's an agreement that he had, and that he has to care about people. And this is what he's here to do in this lifetime. And then I won't spoil it for you, but in his early 20s, I believe, he had a miracle happen. And that was when he gave himself to his mission on the planet. When I found out about him, like he had written his first book, so he worked with clients. He had a 4-year waiting list for clients. He was very, very well known for what he did. And when I read his first book, I think I called in to try to get an appointment. And at that time, as soon as he started writing the books, he stopped taking clients because his mission was now to write these books so that we can become experts on our own health. And in the last 8 years, he's written 8 books, and they're Bibles. Like, they're huge. Like, this is Cleanse to Heal here, very like 600 pages or something, and they're packed. And the information doesn't repeat itself. That's what else is incredible. So now there are, I think, 8 or 9 books even. So just a whole like health encyclopedia. So essentially his mission is to educate us so that we can be our own advocates. Obviously, he would love for doctors, and there are doctors and naturopaths that are adopting his methods as well. Many nutritionists are adopting his methods. And so it really is getting out there. He has 5 million followers on Instagram. I don't know about the other platforms. I don't follow any. Well, I do follow YouTube. And he does have some really nice videos that he does on YouTube as well. So that's a little bit about Anthony William and Spirit of Compassion. I do want to say that, there are some people who say to me that when they hear Anthony speak, they get turned off. You get different versions of him. Sometimes he's quite wound up. He seems a little bit manic and he repeats himself. But I think that's because he's also like he's trying to speak, but he's also got spirit of compassion speaking in his ear. But what struck me about him, and this comes through when he speaks, but also incredibly in the books, there was so much integrity there. Like, to me, when I first opened the first book, Medical Medium, I could feel the frequency. It was perfection. It was, and this was without even reading it all. It was just, there's something really special about the writings. They're quite brilliant. And I own all of the books. I haven't read them all cover to cover, but it just feels like each book, like, let's just say the first book is like a 250-piece puzzle, and it's got 250 pieces of the human health puzzle, and they all fit in beautifully well. There's no contradictions. It's quite incredible, I find. And then the second book, it's the exact same puzzle, but now it's 500 pieces. And then the next book is 1,000 pieces. So the puzzle stays the same. As I say, there's no contradictions. It all feels very logical, intuitive, simple. He doesn't make it any more complicated than it needs to be. Compassionate. So you don't read it thinking, oh, I got to do better. I haven't done this properly. Oh, I've done something wrong. None of that. It is there. It's just oozing with compassion. When you read, you just feel encouraged. You feel uplifted. You feel like you are regaining trust in your body and that you can heal. He reminds you of that over and over again. The other thing is he is incredibly generous with the information. The only thing Anthony sells is books. That's it. He doesn't sell programs. He doesn't sell memberships. Not that there's anything wrong with those things, because I sell programs and memberships, but it's just that he needs to get the information out there. The other thing is, if you never bought a book, if you go online and you write medical medium fatty liver or medical medium psoriasis, It's all there. There's nothing hidden. He's just so generous with the information. The books are worth it to have, mind you, because everything's there at your fingertips, right? And you can sort of leaf through them and put them by your bedside or on your living room table. Beautiful, always beautiful pictures. Every recipe has a gorgeous shot. And um, yeah, so the presence of the books, but many libraries have them as well because they are such a popular series. And that I spoke a little bit about recipes. Each book has extensive recipes that I find are all very simple. I find them to be delicious. Now, you have to get used to this way of cooking, mind you, because there's no salt and there's no oils in them. So you're actually adding flavor by using really nice fresh foods. You're using spices and herbs, lemon juice, lime juice, things like that. And you're welcome to add salt if you want to. But what he says is that the less salt you have, the more hydrated you are, and the more the body is able to cleanse. Because when we're dehydrated, everything kind of gets um, contracted and hard, right? And so lots of hydration in your body helps to dissolve the residues that are in your system. And so this is why you don't want to really be consuming, or not that you don't want to, but you want to be aware that salt will dehydrate you, coffee will dehydrate you, vinegar will dehydrate you, alcohol obviously will dehydrate you, not drinking enough water, not not eating enough fresh foods and salads and things like that. Um, so he speaks a lot, and really all of his protocols, and particularly the 369 cleanse that we do on the nutritional rebirth, is really all about hydration so that the body can really pick up the residues and the toxic deposits that are in the tissues and remove them safely. But I love the recipes very much, and you refer to them a lot. Refer to them a lot. I find it so helpful because it's one thing to know why you're having the health issues you're having, which he's very clear about. And then it's another thing to also know, okay, now this is what you need to do to heal. And then the third piece is, okay, here's the recipes. And in time, you may, obviously, if you're, you know, if you're passionate about cooking, or even if you just like to cook or whatever, you'll figure things out on your own as well. But they're a really great starting point. Um, so when I began this evening, one of the things that I mentioned was that I feel that it's quite important to gradually orient more and more to the intuitive guidance within, that really, and that not just in terms of how we eat, but in terms of how we navigate our relationships, in terms of how we live our lives, where we put our energy. We have this intuitive, clear, authentic guidance that is flowing through us all the time, and that is here to connect us with those things that are most supportive of our being and what our soul's contract is in this lifetime. And I feel very grateful, extremely grateful, to have found medical medium, or he found me. I'm sure I would have eventually, but I feel grateful to have found him so early, because there was just the one book at the time, and now I think people who encounter him, it might feel a little overwhelming because there's so many books. But regardless, I'm sure you'll be able to make your way through things. But also the fact that all of the symptoms that I was having have pretty much cleared up. Sometimes the restless leg gets stirred up, especially when I'm doing the cleanse, because it is coming from viral deposits as well as heavy metals. And when you're cleansing, each time you do the 369, your system digs deeper into the liver. And so what happens is that there's usually a couple of nights where I feel a little bit agitated in my nervous system. But then after the cleanse is over, I feel more settled, more relaxed in my nervous system than ever. So it's a progress, and that's why doing multiple 369s is so helpful, because you're not going to get all the toxins out in one cleanse. It wouldn't be safe to do that, and also we're carrying a whole lifetime of toxins, not to mention those that we have inherited from our parents and from their parents, etc. For example, the heavy metals that are in our bodies could be 1,000 or 2,000 years old, and they get passed on to us through our parents. So I just really wanted to underscore that while I hmm, I would say that I unreservedly recommend the Anthony Williams approach to nutrition and to health. And at the same time, I've never been a follower. I really do my best to think for myself. And I think I'm quite kind of stubborn in that way, even arrogant sometimes. I'll figure it out on my own. I'd rather do things my own way. And yet, I guess I was in a really difficult place when I was having those health issues, and nothing I was doing seemed to be really helping that much. And so I'm very, very grateful that I came across Anthony, and that my intuition told me that the information that he was sharing was going to be helpful for me. And in fact, it was. Like, even after 1 month of following the protocols, I began to feel quite a bit better, and just really relieved that I had found a way that I was quite confident would help me to rebuild my health and to reverse those symptoms. The thing about the medical medium protocols too is that, as I said, they're very kind, they're very compassionate, and he never says you have to be completely plant-based. You could be paleo and use the protocols, you could be vegan and use the protocols, but essentially it's just about incorporating those things that feel right for you at this time. You can incorporate as little or as much as you want to. And as you go along, you may find yourself wanting to incorporate more. So he's really encouraging you to be in your own process. He's not asking you to throw away your own intuition and your own unique life, because we're all dealing with different things, and we may have to overcome certain beliefs that we have taken on around food and nutrition. For example, the fruit thing. A lot of so much fruit fear out there nowadays. And so it takes a lot for people to get over that and to realize, yeah, it's okay to eat 3 or 4 bananas in a day, and then to have a mango or an apple later on, and then to have blueberries later on. And it's okay to eat potatoes. So there's a lot of nightshade fear as well. And Anthony fully encourages tomatoes, potatoes. He says they don't contribute to arthritis, as some of the holistic nutrition experts have said. In fact, they can help to reverse it. He says what does contribute to the arthritis is the dairy and the fats that you're having on top of your nightshades, right? Because normally if you have tomatoes, you're also having cheese. If you're having potatoes, you're also having butter or cheese. And so it's not the foods themselves, it's what we're having with them. So he alleviates a lot of food fear, and also clarifies why certain foods really aren't that helpful. There's a lot of trends out there nowadays that are not helpful at all. In fact, that are contributing to our symptoms, and he helps to give clarity around what exactly is happening. So things, for example, like bone broth or fish oils or apple cider vinegar, all of these things are not helpful at all for our health. And it makes sense when you begin to understand the whole picture of the medical medium approach. It makes sense that these foods would not be helpful, because the bone broth, for example, has quite a large amount of fat, which is very burdening to the liver. And the more fat you throw at the liver, the less it's able to detoxify. And it's got 4,000 functions to do. And if it's being burdened by all that fat, on an ongoing basis, it won't be able to do all the functions that it's supposed to be doing. Apple cider vinegar, so that's dehydrating. He would rather see you doing celery juice in the morning if you're looking to improve your digestion, because I know some people are taking it in warm water in the morning to improve digestion, and in fact it actually in time will do the opposite as it dehydrates the liver. So if you really want to improve your digestion, your best ally there is celery juice. So if you haven't heard about the medical medium, you may have heard about celery juice because it's quite a popular trend right now. Some people are picking it up without actually giving him credit, but he is the one that has been speaking about this for 20 or 25 years. And all of his protocols include drinking celery juice in the morning, generally lemon water first in the morning. So this is all about, as I mentioned earlier, hydration. And so if you do the 3-6, you'll be drinking anywhere from 16 to 32 ounces of lemon water in the morning. So it's fresh squeezed lemon juice in just preferably some kind of filtered or purified water. And then you follow that with celery juice. So he calls celery juice the most important medicine of our time. Again, because we are dealing with so much buildup of viral byproducts, which I'll speak about that in a moment, but basically viruses are the root cause of pretty much 95% of our symptoms, I would say. Those in conjunction with heavy metals, they actually kind of work together. The viruses consume the heavy metals, and that's what creates the toxicity in the body. But getting back to celery juice, it's the one food that helps to pretty much boost every part of your physiology, from your digestion. It rebuilds the walls of the gut. It helps to remove residue from the walls of the small intestine and the large intestine. So it's the mineral salts that are in there are sort of like, it's almost like a soap that lifts that off. It also kills off the viruses that might be hiding beneath the walls of or beneath the residues that are sitting against the wall of your intestine and creating maybe digestive issues and bloating and constipation and irritable bowel. And then once it gets into the liver, it begins to start cleansing and cleaning and dissolving the pockets of residues that might be there. Because what happens when the liver takes in toxins through your food, through your water, through your air, a lot of it is we may be trying to eat properly, but we don't know there was pesticide residue on that food, or we don't know that the water that we bathed in was bringing toxins into our body. We don't know the air that we breathed, or the animal flesh that we ate had some kind of toxins in them. So but what the liver does to deal with those is, as the food gets digested, it goes to the liver first, and it does its best to pull out the things that could be damaging to the brain, first of all, but also the rest of the nervous system and the rest of the organs. And as it pulls those out, if it doesn't have the time to purge, it just drives them deeper into the liver. So it tries to kind of tuck them, just like you would tuck things away in your attic or in your basement. That's what the liver's doing. So there's this core in the liver, the 3 levels down, where a lot of the toxins get kind of deposited. But of course, what happens in time is that when it's overloaded, it begins to spill into the other layers of the liver. And that's when we begin to have other major issues with our health. And so the celery juice helps to begin to slowly and safely dissolve. You don't want to be removing so much that it overwhelms the rest of the system, or that you end up reabsorbing it because the system is just not capable of handling it. So it's an intelligent cleanse as well. And as you read about the 3-6, it's really interesting how even the way that it's kind of packaged in 9 days and 3 sections to the cleanse, there's reasoning behind all of that. There's reasoning behind what you do in the morning, what you do in the evening, what you have for lunch and dinner. So that I find really quite brilliant. And beyond that, when you do it, you feel the effects. You feel clearer physically, you feel lighter, digestion improves. You might find your eyes and your skin begins to glow a little bit more. Your energy perks up. And there could also be some days where your energy doesn't feel as good because your body's working so hard, and that's, to be expected. Same thing with the emotional body. Generally by the end of a cleanse, there's quite a bit of clarity emotionally. That doesn't mean that there might not be a few days during the cleanse where emotions begin to move out, because, of course, you can't separate the emotional body from the physical body. And so, if we have unintegrated emotions in our body, when we begin to eat high vibration foods and when we begin to dissolve the toxic residues, oftentimes out with that will also come certain emotions that are ready to be liberated. But the foods help us with that. They help to make it gentle. They help to support us. Like every fruit and every vegetable, every herb not only has an effect on our physiology, they actually also have a profound effect on our emotional body and on our spiritual body.